Is it showing it on your end? Okay, here we go. Chapter 8. The day hunting season opened, I was as nervous as Sammy, our house cat. Part of that seemingly endless day was spent getting things ready for the coming night. I cleaned my lantern and filled it full of oil. With hog lard, I greased my boots until they were soft as a hummingbird's nest. I was grinding my axe when Papa came around. He smiled as he said, "This is a big night, isn't it?" "It sure is, Papa," I said, "and I've waited a long time for it." "Yes, I know," he said. "I've been thinking there's not too much to do around here during the hunting season. I'm pretty sure I can take care of things, so you just go ahead and hunt all you want to." "Thanks, Papa," I said. "I guess I'll be out pretty late at night, and I'll probably have to do a lot of sleeping in the daytime." Yeah, Zeke? Yeah, it might be an old way to spell it. I don't know. Sometimes words were spelled differently a little bit back in the day. But yeah, usually the word axe is A-X-E. You're correct. Okay, Papa started frowning. "You know," he said, "your mother doesn't like this hunting of yours very much. She's worried about you being all out all by yourself." "I can't see why Mama has to worry," I said. "Haven't I been roaming the woods ever since I was big enough to walk? And I'm almost 14 now." "I know," said Papa. "It's all right with me, but women are a little different than men. They worry more. Now, just to be on the safe side, I think it would be a good idea for you to tell us where you'll be hunting. Then, if anything happens, we'll know where to look." I told him I would, but I didn't think anything was going to happen. After Papa had left, I started thinking, he doesn't even talk to me like I was a boy anymore. He talks to me like I'm a man. These wonderful thoughts made me feel just about as big as our old red mule. I had a good talk with my dogs. I lost my place. I don't know how. What? Where on earth was I on this page? I had a good talk with my dogs. "I've waited almost 3 years for this night," I said, "and it hasn't been easy. I've taught you everything I know, and I want you to do your best." Little Ann acted like she understood. She whined and saved me a wash job off my face. Old Dan may have understood, but he didn't act like it. He just lay there in the sunshine, all stretched out and limber as a rag. What does limber as a rag mean? Fiona? Hang on. Somebody is talking in their fort, and they're going to lose their fort. Okay, go, Fiona.
It sounds like somebody, like a dog, as they're all stretched out. I think it kind of means like he's all stretched out and he's like all over the place.
All over the place? Not necessarily limber as a rag. He is kind of stretched out all over the place, but not. Zeke, what do you think?
Like a dog, like just like laying out and like limberly, like he's just like laying down, like maybe his paws up or something. And he's like limber as a rag means like that. He's like like.
All right, Kendall, give it a go. Nobody's nailed it yet.
My dog has also done this before. They just stretch out so far like a rag. They stretch out like
limber. I like you guys are getting the stretched out part, and he's just laying there. But you haven't nailed what limber means yet. Josie, give it a go.
Maybe he's just limp and like not moving.
Limp is kind of the key word there. So if you think about like a wash rag or a blanket, kind of the same deal, right? It's like super floppy. I totally just stole this from Riley's lap. Like limber, like it's really floppy and whatever, right? You can have that back. So old Dan's just laying there like super floppy. If you're under your fort, you're totally missing the show I'm putting on right now. But anyway, so he's limber as a rag, so floppy as a rag. Okay. All right. Now I've lost my place again. Limber, you just lay there all stretched out, limber as a rag. Josie.
I think that you can present us onto the screen because if you can still, as a student, click present now, and then it says do a tab, and then you can click on the Meet tab, and then it will show us. But I don't know how you could put it on your board.
Yeah, I don't.
Maybe, like, how would you connect that?
You have to press control.
Am I room 109?
Yeah.
Let me give it a go.
You can ask for an HDMI cord, and then you can press.
Winning. You guys are on the board. Okay. All right. I still don't know if I can use the tablet at math. We'll get to that when we get there. All right. During supper. Go to the nurse. During supper, Mama asked me where I was going to hunt. I'm not going far, I said, just down on the river. I could tell Mama was worried, and it didn't make me feel too good. Billy, she said, I don't approve of this hunting, but it looks like I can't say no. Not after you've been through getting your dogs and all that training. Well, he'll be all right, Papa said. Besides, he's getting to be a good-sized man now. Man, Mama exclaimed. Why, he's still just a little boy. You can't keep him a little boy always, Papa said. He's got to grow up someday. I know, Mama said, but I don't like it. Not at all, and I can't help worrying. Mama, please don't worry about me, I said. I'll be all right. Why, I've been all over these hills. You know that. I know, she said, but that was in the daytime. I never worried too much when it was daylight, but at night, that's different. It'll be dark and anything could happen. There won't be anything happen, I said. I promise I'll be careful. Mama got up from the table saying, well, it's like I said, I can't say no and I can't help worrying. I'll just pray every night you're out. The way Mama had me feeling, I didn't know whether to go hunting or not. Papa must have sensed how I felt. It's dark now, he said, and I understand those coons start stirring pretty early. You'd better be going, hadn't you? While Mama was bundling me up, Papa lit my lantern. He handed it to me, saying, I'd like to see a big coonskin on the smokehouse wall in the morning. The whole family followed me out on the porch. There we all got a surprise. My dogs were sitting on the steps waiting for me. I heard Papa laugh. Why, they know you're going hunting, he says. Know it as well as anything. Well, I never, said Mama. Do you really think they do? It looks like they do. Why, just look at them. Little Ann started wiggling and twisting. Old Dan trotted out to the gate, stopped, turned around, and looked at me. Sure, they know Billy's going hunting, piped the little one, and I know why. How do you know so much, silly? Asked the oldest one. Because I told little Ann, that's why, she said, and she told old Dan. That's how they know. We all had to laugh at her. The last thing I heard as I left the house was the voice of my mother. Be careful, Billy, she said, and don't stay out late. It was a beautiful night, still and frosty. A big grinning Ozark moon had the countryside bathed in a soft yellow glow. The starlit heaven reminded me of a large blue umbrella, outspread and with the handle broken off. Just before I reached the timber, I called my dogs to me. Now, the trail will be a little different tonight, I whispered. It won't be a hide dragged on the ground. It'll be the real thing. So remember everything I taught you, and I'm dependent on you. Just put one up a tree, and I'll do the rest. I turned them loose, saying, go get them. And they streaked for the timber. I'm going to pause here for a second. He is talking to these dogs like they are humans. Do you think that they actually do understand what he's saying?
Yes. Yeah, my dog does. No way.
In a way? Explain. Do you guys think that your pets understand you when you're talking to them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jason, what do you think?
No, because I've heard that dogs don't actually know what you're saying when you talk. They can just hear your tone of your voice. That's what makes them know what you're saying. They don't know exactly what you're saying, but they just hear the tone of
Okay.
your voice.
So what Jason said was that dogs don't necessarily know the words that you're saying and understand all of the words you're saying, but they do know like the tone of your voice and your intonation. And so they understand if you're happy or mad or sad or something like that. But it definitely does seem like Billy's dogs kind of know what's going on. Lily, what do you think?
Because some dogs know their name, but I kind of think that they kind of also do know what you're saying.
Right. I think that, yeah, Lily said she thinks they do at least recognize some words because a lot of pets, like, they know their names. So they recognize that sound. Sean, what are your thoughts?
So you know how the dog sled race is going on?
The dog sled race, the Iditarod that you guys learned about in 4th grade?
Yeah, so like they're trained to understand what they like. They like when to turn right and when to turn.
Right. So those dogs are trained to recognize certain commands and certain words like turn right, turn left, stop, faster. So they can be trained to recognize certain words. Do they understand every word in the English language?
No.
Probably not if you haven't specifically worked on them with all of those vocabulary words. But they definitely, on the words that they do know, which some of those hunting words they probably do recognize because Billy's been training them. And they definitely know, they know Billy, right? They can feel, like, dogs can sense your like emotions. So they can sense Billy's excitement. And they can definitely hear the tone in his voice. And so they know that tonight's a special night and tonight's a different night at minimum. Zeke.
So like the dogs can kind of like understand like the tone of your voice, but like certain words, like if you train them to, they can do that. Like if you train a dog enough on one thing, they'll be able to do it.
Yeah, as if they're trained on it, they can do it. So there are definitely like words, key words. I'm sure there are key hunting words that they're recognizing because they've heard Billy say them over and over when he was doing those activities with them.
Yeah, and like my old dog, like if you tell a dog like that is trained properly to sit, like they know what that means, and then
like sit and shake, like, yeah, you can teach it. Roll over, you can teach them those kind of things.
My dog, Ava, she's big, and whenever we say hug, she hops up on our shoulders.
There you go. Yeah, Grayson said their dog, huge Great Dane, right, is trained when you say hug to like hop up on their shoulders. Okay, here we go. They streaked for the timber, which is the forest, the trees. By the time I had reached the river, every nerve in my body was drawn up as tight as a fiddle string. Big-eyed and with ears open, I walked on, stopping now and then to listen. The way I was slipping along, anyone would have thought I was trying to slip up on a coon myself. I had never seen a night so peaceful and still. All around me, tall sycamore trees gleamed like white streamers in the moonlight. A prowling skunk came wobbling up the riverbank. He stopped when he saw me. I smiled at the foxfire glow of his small, beady red eyes. He turned and disappeared in the underbrush. I heard a sharp snap and a feathery rustle in some brush close by. A small rodent started squealing in agony. A nighthawk had found his supper. Across the river and from far back in the rugged mountains, I heard the baying of a hound. I wondered if it was the same one I had heard from my window on those nights so long ago. Although my eyes were seeing the wonders of the night, my ears were ever alert, listening for the sound of my hounds telling me they had found a trail. I was expecting one of them to bawl, but when it came, it startled me. The deep tones of old Dan's voice jarred the silence around me. I dropped my axe and almost dropped my lantern. A strange feeling came over me. I took a deep breath and threw back my head to give the call of the hunter, but something went wrong. My throat felt like it had been tied in a knot. I swallowed a couple of times and the knot disappeared. As loud as I could, I whipped, "Woo-wee! Get him, Dan! Get him!" Little Ann came in. The bell-like tones of her voice made shivers run up and down my spine. I whooped to her, "Woo-wee! Tell it to him, little girl! Tell it to him!" This was what I had prayed for, worked for, and sweated for. My own little hounds bawling on the trail of a river coon. I don't know why I cried, but I did. And while the tears rolled, I whooped again and again. They straightened the trail out, and I headed downriver. I took off after them as fast as I could run. A mile downstream, the coon pulled his first trick. I could tell by my dogs' voices that they had lost the trail. When I came to them, they were out on an old drift, sniffing around. The coon had pulled a simple trick. He had run out on the drift, leaped into the water, and crossed the river. To an experienced coonhound, this crude trick would have been nothing at all. But my dogs were just big, awkward pups trailing their first live coon. I stood and watched, wondering if they'd remember the training I'd given them. Now and then I'd whoop, urging them on. Old Dan was having a fit. He whined and he bawled, he whimpered and he cried. He came to me and reared up, begging for help. I'm not going to help you, I scolded, and you're not going to find him out on that drift. If you just remember some of the training I gave you, you could find the trail. Now go find that coon. He ran back out on the drift and started searching. Little Ann came to me. I could see the pleading in her warm gray eyes. I'm ashamed of you, little girl, I said. I thought you had more sense than this. If you let him fool you this easily, you'll never be a coon dog. She whined, turned, and trotted downstream to search again for the lost trail. I couldn't understand. Had all the training I had given them been useless? I knew if I waded the river, they would follow me. Once on the other side, it would be easy for them to find the trail. But I didn't want it that way. I wanted them to figure it out by themselves. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. I sat down and buried my face in my arms. Out on the drift, old Dan started whining. It made me angry, and I got up to scold him again. I could not understand his actions. Girls up in this front tent, all I'm hearing is giggling under there. I hope you are listening. Okay, he was running along. I couldn't understand his actions. He was running along the edge of the drift, whimpering and staring downriver. I looked that way. I could see something swimming for the opposite shore. At first, I thought it was a muskrat. In the middle of the stream, where the moonlight was the brightest, I got a good look. It was little Ann. With a loud whoop, I told her how proud I was. My little girl had remembered her training. She came out on a gravel bar, shook the water from her body, and disappeared into thick timber. Minutes later, she let me know she had found the trail. Before the tones of her voice had died away, old Dan plowed into the water. He was so eager to join her, I could hear him whining as he swam. As soon as his feet touched bottom in the shallows, he started bawling and lunging. White sheets of water, knocked high in the moonlight by his churning feet, gleamed like thousands of tiny white stars. He came out of the river onto the sandbar. In his eagerness, his feet slipped in the loose sand, and down he went. He came out of his roll, running and bawling. Ahead of him was a log jam. He sailed over it and disappeared down the riverbank. Seconds later, I heard his deep voice blend with the sharp cries of little Ann. At that moment, no boy in the world could have been more proud of his dogs than I was. Never again would I doubt them. I was hurrying along, looking for the shallow riffle so I could wade across, when the voices of my dogs stopped. I waited and listened. They opened again on my side of the stream. The coon had crossed back over. I couldn't help smiling. I knew that never again would a ringtail fool them by swimming the river. The next trick the old fellow pulled was dandy. He climbed a large water oak standing about 10 feet from the river and simply disappeared. I got there in time to see my dogs swimming for the opposite shore. For half an hour they worked that bank. Not finding the trail, they swam back. I stood and watched them. They practically tore the riverbank to pieces looking for that trail. Old Dan knew the coon had climbed the water oak. He went back, reared up on it, and bawled a few times. There's no use in doing that, boy, I said. I know he climbed it, but he's not there now. Maybe it's like Grandpa said, he just climbed right out through the top and disappeared in the stars. My dogs didn't know it, but I was pretty well convinced that was what the coon had done. But they wouldn't give up. Once again, they crossed over to the other shore. It was no use. The coon hadn't touched that bank. They came back. Old Dan went up the river, and little Ann worked downstream. An hour and a half later, they gave up and came to me begging for help. I knelt down between their wet bodies. While I scratched and petted them, I let them know that I still loved them. I'm not mad, I said. I know you did your best. If that coon can fool both of us, then we're just beat. We'll go someplace else to hunt. He's not the only coon in these bottoms. Just as I picked up my axe and lantern, little Ann let out a bawl and tore out down the riverbank. Old Dan with a bewildered look on his face. What's bewildered? Surprised? What else, DJ?
Like surprised. He is like when you're like that.
Okay. Zeke.
You know, bewildered because it's kind of like surprised, but it can be like his face is kind of like wild, kind of.
Okay.
Like,
I also think of the word confused when I think of bewildered, like a surprised but confused at the same time. Okay. All right. Bewildered look on his face, and he stood there for a moment looking after her. Then, raising his head high in the air, he made my eardrums ring with his deep voice. I could hear the underbrush popping as he ran to join her. I couldn't figure out what had taken place. Surely little Ann had heard or seen something. I could tell by their voices that whatever it was they were after, they were close enough to see it, and they were probably running by sight. The animal left the bottoms and headed for the mountains. Whatever it was, it must have realized my dogs were crowding it too closely. At the edge of the foothills, it turned and came back toward the river. I was still trying to figure out what was going on when I realized that on striking the river, the animal had again turned and was coming straight toward me. I sat my lantern down and tightened my grip on the axe. I was standing my ground quite well when visions of bears, lions, and all kinds of other animals started flashing across my mind. I jumped behind a big sycamore and was trying hard to press my body into the tree when a big coon came tearing by. 25 yards behind him came my dogs, running side by side. I saw them clearly when they passed me, bawling every time their feet touched the ground. After seeing that, there was nothing to be scared of. Once again, I was the fearless hunter, screaming and yelling loud as I could, "Get him, boy, get him!" I tore out after them. The trails I knew so well were forgotten. I took off straight through the brush. I was tearing my way through some elders when the voices of my dogs stopped. Holding my breath, I stood still and waited, and then it came. The long, drawn-out bawl of the tree bark. My little hounds had done it. They had treed their first coon. When I came to them and saw what they had done, I was speechless. I groaned and closed my eyes. I didn't want to believe it. There were a lot of big sycamores in the bottoms, but the one in which my dogs had treed was the giant of them all. While prowling the woods, I had seen the big tree many times. I had always stopped and admired it. Like a king in his own domain, it towered far above the smaller trees. It had taken me quite a while to find a name suitable for the big sycamore. For a while, I had called it the chicken tree. In some ways, it had reminded me of a mother hen hovering over her young in a rainstorm. Its huge limbs spread out over the small birch, ash, box elder, and water oak as if it alone were their protector. Next, I named it the giant. That name didn't last long. Mama told us children a story about a big giant that lived in the mountains and ate little children that were lost. Right away, I started looking for another name. One day, while lying in the warm sun staring at its magnificent beauty, I found the perfect name. From that day on, it was just called the Big Tree. I named the bottoms around it the Big Tree Bottoms. Walking around it and using the moon as a light, I started looking for the coon. High up in the top, I saw a hollow in the end of a broken limb, and I figured that was the coon's den. I could climb almost any tree I'd ever seen, but I knew I could never climb the big sycamore, and it would take days to chop it down. There had been very little hope from the beginning, but on seeing the hollow, I gave up. "Come on," I said to my dogs. "There's nothing I can do. We'll go someplace else and find another coon." I turned to walk away, but my hounds made no move to follow. They started whining. Old Dan reared up, placed his front paws on the trunk, and started bawling. "I know he's there," I said, "but there's nothing I can do. I can't climb it. Why, it's 60 feet up to the first limb, and it would take me a month to cut it down." Again, I turned and started on my way. Little Ann came to me. She reared up and started licking my hands. Swallowing the knot in my throat, I said, "I'm sorry, little girl. I want him just as badly as you do, but there's no way I can get him." She ran back to the tree and started digging in the soft ground close to the roots. "Come on now," I said in a gruff voice. "You're both acting silly. You know I'd get that coon for you if I could, but I can't." With a whip-dog look on her face and her tail between her legs, little Ann came over. She wouldn't even look at me. Old Dan walked slowly around behind the tree and hid himself. He peeped around the big trunk and looked at me. The message I read in his friendly eyes tore at my heart. He seemed to be saying, "You told us to put one in a tree and you would do the rest." With tears in my eyes, I looked again at the big sycamore. A wave of anger came over me. Gritting my teeth, I said, "I don't care how big you are. I'm not going to let my dogs down. I told them if they put a coon in a tree, I'd do the rest, and I am going to. I'm going to cut you down, and I don't care if it takes me a whole year." I walked over and sank my axe as deep as I could in the smooth white bark. My dogs threw a fit. Little Ann started turning in circles. I could hear her pleased whimper and cry. Old Dan bawled and started gnawing on the big tree's trunk. At first, it was easy. My axe was sharp and the chips flew. 2 hours later, things were different. My arms felt like 2 dead grapevines, and my back felt like someone had pulled a plug out of one end of it and drained all the sap out. While taking a breather, I saw I was making more progress than I thought I would. The cut I had started was a foot deep, but I still had a long way to go. Sitting on their rears, my dogs waited and watched. I smiled at the look on their faces. Every time I stopped chopping, they would come over. While little Ann washed the sweat from my face, old Dan would inspect my work. He seemed to be pleased with what he saw, for he always wagged his tail. Along about daylight, I got my second wind, and I really did make the chips fly. This burst of energy cost me dearly. By sunup, I was so stiff I could hardly move. My hands and arms were numb. My back screamed with pain. I could go no further. Sitting down, I leaned back against the big tree and fell asleep. Little Ann woke me up by washing my face. I groaned with the torture of getting to my feet. Every muscle in my body seemed to be tied in a knot. I was thinking of going down to the river to wash my face in the cool water when I heard a loud whoop. I recognized my father's voice. I whooped to let him know where I was. Papa was riding our red mule. After he rode up, he just sat there and looked me over. He glanced at my dogs and at the big sycamore. I saw the worry leave his face. He straightened his shoulders, pursed his lips, and blew out a little air. He reminded me of someone who had just dropped a heavy load. In a slow, calm voice, he asked, "Are you all right, Billy?" "Yes, Papa," I said. "Oh, I'm a little tired and sleepy. Otherwise, I'm fine." He slid from the mule's back and came over. "Your mother's worried," he says. "When you didn't come in, we didn't know what had happened. You should have come home." I didn't know what to say. I bowed my head and looked at the ground. I was trying hard to choke back the tears when I felt his hand on my shoulder. "I'm not scolding," he said. "We just thought maybe you had an accident or something." I looked up and saw a smile on his face. He turned and looked again at the tree. "Say," he said, "this is the sycamore you call the big tree, isn't it?" I nodded my head. "Is there a coon in it?" he asked. "There sure is, Papa," I said. "He's in that hollow limb. See that one way up there? That's why I couldn't come home. I'm afraid he'd get away." "Maybe you just think he's there," said Papa. "I believe I'd make sure before I cut down a tree that big." "Oh, he's there all right," I said. "My dogs weren't 10 feet behind him when he went up it." "Why are you so determined to get this coon?" Papa asked. "Couldn't you go somewhere else and tree one? Maybe the tree would be a smaller one." "I thought about that, Papa," I said, "but I made a bargain with my dogs. I told them if they'd put one in a tree, I'd do the rest. Well, they fulfilled their part of the bargain. Now it's up to me to do my part, and I'm going to, Papa. I'm going to cut it down. I don't care if it takes me a year." Papa laughed and said, "Oh, I don't think it'll take that long, but it will take a while. I'll tell you what I'll do. You take the mule and go get some breakfast, and I'll chop on it until you get back." "No, Papa," I said. "I don't want any help. I want to cut it down all by myself. You see, if somebody helps me, it wouldn't feel like I've kept my part of the agreement." An astonished look came over my father's face. "Why, Billy," he said, "you can't stay down here without anything to eat and no sleep. Besides, it'll take at least 2 days to cut that tree down, and that is hard work." And I'm going to pause here. So Billy is determined to do this by himself. Explain to me why he does not want help from his father. Parker, what do you think?
But this is his first like meeting with his dogs,
Mm-hmm.
and he wants to like get it himself.
Right. He's wanted this for so long. This is his first coon with his own dogs that he trained. He wants to finish what he started, right? Zeke. Oh, Sean.
Yeah.
Sean, because I can't see Sean wherever he's at. Okay, nope, we don't need that. Just answer.
That's like kind of what you already said, but
Sean says he agrees with what we said.
yeah.
All right.
Okay, so
All right, Zico.
okay, so like you know sometimes if like especially if it's your first time, like you get something for your birthday and like your siblings wanna write it or something or like play with it, like you don't want them to at first and like you wanna and then like sometimes if you're doing your first something for your first time, you wanna finish it by yourself so you can get all the credit.
Right. He wants all the credit. And Zeke compared it. He made a connection to like when you get like a present for your birthday or Christmas, and then your siblings are like, "Ooh, I want to try it." You're like, "Get off. It's my present. I get to play with it first. I get to ride it first. I get to whatever first, right? It's yours." Yeah, my hoverboard, get off. You want to try it first, right? And then that's the thing, like the pride of it. Like he spent all of this time saving for the dogs, training the dogs. He wants to be able to get full credit for seeing it through till the end. You know, it's his first time, like Parker said. So, all right, here we go. "Please, Papa," I begged, Don't make me quit. I just have to get that coon. If I don't, my dogs won't ever believe in me again. Papa didn't know what to tell me. He scratched his head, looking over to my dogs and back at me. He started walking around. I waited for him to make up his mind. He finally reached a decision. Well, all right, he said, if that's the way you want it, I'm for it, even if it's only an agreement between you and your dogs. A man's word isn't any good. If a man's word isn't any good, he's no good himself. What does that mean? If a man's word isn't any good, then he's no good himself. DJ.
Well, he's saying that if you lie, then you're as good as that lie. It's not good. So he's saying you're bad. You're not as good as that lie. You said that you're going to do something, but you lied and you didn't actually do it. So then you're as bad as that
right.
lie.
Your word, and this is something that still is true today, but it's kind of an old-fashioned phrase. But saying that, if you're telling the truth and you're honest, that just says something about your character and who you are as a person. And if you say you're going to do something, but you don't follow through, are people going to trust you and rely on you down the road? After a while, nobody's going to believe you're going to do what you say. If you let down your friends over and over again, they're not going to be able to count on you. And so they're not going to think, as highly of you. But if you make a commitment and you honor it and you are good to your word, then people know they can count on you. They can rely on you. They can trust you. So they're saying a man is only as good as his word. So if you say you're going to do something, you do it. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of people these days that aren't that way. They say they're going to do something and then they don't do it. But if you think to the era when this book was written and like your grandpas and even, your, some of your parents that maybe are a little older even, they still have this way of thinking like who you are as a person is based on your word and how hardworking you are and that kind of a thing. And they take that really seriously. So, all right. Papa didn't know what to tell me. Man's word isn't any good. He's no good himself. Now, I have to get back and tell your mother that you're all right. It's a cinch that you can't do this kind of work on an empty stomach. So I'll send your oldest sister down with the lunch bucket. With tears in my eyes, I said, tell Mama I'm sorry for not coming home last night. Don't worry about your mother, he said as he climbed on the mule's back. I'll take care of her. Another thing, I have to make a trip to the store today, and I'll talk this over with your grandfather. He may be able to help some way. After Papa left, things were a little different. The tree didn't look as big, and my axe wasn't as heavy. I even managed to sing a little as I chopped away. When my sister came with the lunch bucket, I could have kissed her, but I didn't. She took one look at the big tree, and her blue eyes got as big as a guinea's egg. I'm assuming a guinea's egg is pretty big. You're crazy, she gasped. Absolutely crazy. Why, it'll take a month to cut that tree down, all for an old coon. I was so busy with the fresh side of pork, fried eggs, and hot biscuits, I didn't pay much attention to her. After all, she was a girl, and girls don't think like boys do. She raved on. You can't... Oh, calm your booties down, ladies. All right. She raved on. You can't possibly cut it down today. And what are you going to do when it gets dark? I'm going to keep right on chopping, I said. I stayed with it last night, didn't I? Well, I'll stay till it's cut down. I don't care how long it takes. My sister got upset. She looked at me, threw back her small head, and looked up to the top of the big sycamore. You're as crazy as a bedbug, she said. Well, I never heard of such a thing. She stepped over in front of me and very seriously asked if she could look in my eyes. Look in my eyes, I said. What do you want to do that for? I'm not sick. Yes, you are, Billy, she said. Very sick. Mama said when old man Johnson went crazy, his eyes turned green. I want to see if yours have. This was too much. If you don't get out of here, I shouted, you're going to be red instead of green, and I mean that. I grabbed up a stick and started toward her. Of course, I wouldn't have hit her for anything. This scared her, though, when she started for the house. I heard her saying something about an old coon as she disappeared into the underbrush. Down in the bottom of my lunch bucket, I found a neat little package of scraps for my dogs. While they were eating, I walked down to the spring and filled the bucket with cool water. The food did wonders for me. My strength came back. I spit on my hands and whistling a coon hunter's tune, I started making the chips fly. The cut grew so big I could have laid down in it. I moved over to the other side and started a new one. Once while I was taking a rest, old Dan came over to inspect my work. He hopped in the cut and sniffed around. "You'd better get out of there," I said. "If that tree takes a notion to fall, it'll mash you flatter than a tadpole's tail." With a no-care look on his friendly face, he gave me a hurry-up signal with a wag of his tail. Little Ann had dug a bed in a pile of dead leaves. She looked as if she were asleep, but I knew she wasn't. Every time I stopped swinging the axe, she'd raise her head and look at me. All right. Chapter 8. All done. Yeah, it's been restarting a couple of times here and there. It's at 86% now. So we might make it by math time, I hope. All right.
It's taking longer because there's multiple updates piled on top of each other.
Okay. Josie.
Do we do the questions?
Yeah, today I am going to have you guys go ahead and work on the questions. So, yes. So I'm going to go ahead and probably turn off the call. And then you guys will have some time to work on your questions before math. And hopefully my computer gets its act together before math. Okay. Yes, Cam.
I was just wondering, do we need to do the enrichment and the inferences?
No, just because to say what inferences, the enrichment, what inferences can we make about Billy? We talked so much about Billy yesterday with the character traits and inferred some things about him yesterday. So I don't think we need to do that today, Cam. So just the questions and the vocabulary today.
Got it.
All right, perfect. All right, so I'll see you guys in like 15, 20 minutes or so.
Bye.
Right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.